More than 100 years ago, the suburbs of Chicago were a very different place, a scattering of small towns amidst a mostly rural and undeveloped landscape, stitched loosely together by rutted dirt roads and railroads. Into this quiet world ventured a new class of migrants, wealthy Chicago businessmen looking to escape the noise and bustle of the city in order to enjoy the bucolic atmosphere of the countryside. These were the gentlemen farmers who bought up thousands of acres of farmland in the rural areas that ringed Chicago, so as to establish hobby farms and sometimes grand estates, centered by large houses or mansions and top-notch farming facilities, and where fox hunts, horse shows, and polo games were imported as cultural norms.
With the passing of the founders of these estates and their heirs over the past century, these once idyllic properties have been utterly transformed, often being carved up by the sprawl of suburban subdivisions. Most of the original grand houses and their auxiliary buildings have been torn down, often being too expensive to maintain. However, some of these estates have survived to the present, in the form of forest preserves and private parks, and even a few of the great houses, the gravitational center of these properties, have survived into the 21st century. One of the few and likely survivors, the subject of this video series, is the house and estate built by Francis S. Peabody in the late 1910s, now part of the Mayslake Forest Preserve in Oakbrook in DuPage County, Illinois.
In the first segment of this video series, we will provide a tour of the surviving Peabody House and associated structures, focusing on their design and use over the past century. In a subsequent video, we will take a deep dive into the history of the Mayslake landscape, from its earliest days when Native Americans roamed freely across its prairies and forests, to the initial creation of the Peabody Mayslake Estate, to its longtime use as a Roman Catholic Franciscan retreat, and to the present day, where the general public can enjoy its facilities, grounds, and natural beauty as part of a DuPage County Forest Preserve.
Primary sources for this video include the DuPage County Forest Preserve District archives and staff, conversations with Peabody and Mayslake historical researchers Jackson Hartley, David Hill, and Linda Neff. The 1993 National Register of Historic Places application, authored by Audrey Mushler and Susan Benjamin.
The Peabody House is located within the Mayslake Forest Preserve, which includes almost 90 acres of savanna, prairie, wetlands, and lakes, in Oakbrook, DuPage County, Illinois, bounded by 31st Street to the north, St. Paschal Drive to the east, 35th Street to the south, and subdivisions to the west. The main entrance to the facility is on the south side of 31st Street, about a half-mile east of Midwest Road and a third of a mile west of Illinois Route 83. You can still see the original gates and skirting wall to the Peabody Estate, about 100 feet to the east of the main driveway, now serving as the gateway for a footpath. A large and well-appointed gatehouse once guarded the estate just to the west of the gates, about where the Forest Preserve driveway is today located.
As was often the case with the grand houses on large estates, the driveway was engineered to reveal the house to arriving guests in its most flattering aspect. Here the driveway approaches from the north. The drive then turns southeast. A final turn takes us southwest. Where the visitor experiences a grand reveal of the main portico and facade of the building.
This house was built by Francis Stuyvesant Peabody, coal magnate and industrialist. Construction starting in 1919 and completing in 1921. It is of Tudor Revival design and was architected by renowned Chicago architect Benjamin H. Marshall, who also designed the Blackstone Hotel and the Iroquois Theater, among many other buildings in the Chicago area. The original house or mansion was approximately 26,000 square feet in size, containing 39 rooms, including 16 bedrooms and 12 baths. The structure is said to be modeled after the 15th century Compton Winyates Manor House in Warwickshire, England, UK, perhaps intending to underscore Peabody's English ancestry. Peabody intended to use this Mayslake home for his retirement, for just himself and his wife, Mary Sullivan Peabody. But sadly he died in August of 1922, within months of moving into the house. Shortly thereafter, the house and estate were sold off by his heirs to the Franciscan Fathers of St. Louis, who established and operated a Roman Catholic retreat facility here from 1925 through 1991. The Peabody House was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1994. Our tour will begin with the first floor of the building, starting in the entrance hallway. We will then proceed into the living room, followed in turn by the dining room, breakfast porch, and kitchen area in the eastern portion of the house. We will then traverse back to the western part of the building, exploring the library, Peabody's study, the library nook, and finally the sun porch.
The main entrance to the building, recently restored, is a large oak wood double door, surmounted by a faux, but menacing, portcullis. Above the doorway is the Peabody family crest, emblazoned with the motto in Latin, Murus Arius Conscientia Sana, a quote attributed to the Roman poet Horace, meaning, "A sound conscience is a wall of bronze," or in modern terms, "A sound conscience is a solid defense." Just inside the front doors is a heated vestibule. A few steps through French doors brings us into the main entry hall, where visitors and guests would have been received by the Peabody servants.
The marble steps and floor provide a sense of formality and permanence. The stone walls likewise signal this same pedigree. However, the apparent stone walls are actually a plaster glaze, made to appear as carefully fitted stonework, referred to as faux cane stone. Although a richly carved, dark English walnut staircase envelops the visitor, the building design instead draws your attention through the opening in front of you, through the main hall or living room, to the beautiful natural views of the lake to the southwest of the building. The doors to the living room were added by the Franciscans in the late 1920s, as otherwise this entry to the main hall would have been more wide open and welcoming to the interior of the house.
The living room was of Italian Renaissance villa design, a long room with a gallery of tall windows facing southwest, filling the room with light and embracing the pastoral lake setting beyond. Indeed, as we will see, most of the rooms of this house were designed around the natural beauty surrounding the house to the south. A large Tudor limestone fireplace warms the room along the northwest interior, with carved crested shields and a flourish of leaves and vines. The floor is of two-tone marble in a harlequin checkerboard pattern, while the ceilings are decorated with rich ornamental plaster details, emulating stucco duro. The walls are finished with a hand-worked plaster, as are most of the walls in the building, and are painted to match the original colors. Had Francis Peabody lived, this room would have been the main area for entertaining guests and family. As it was, the Franciscans used this space as a chapel for decades, with the altar adjacent to the fireplace, hence the doors added to the entryway. This room was restored to its original design by the DuPage County Forest Preserve in 2009.
To the southeast of the main hall or living room, we step down a short marble staircase into the dining room. The floor of the dining area continues the marble harlequin design of the living room. The walls are decorated with light, elegant panel molding. Wall sconces and chandeliers provide much of the lighting. A fireplace once stood on the southeast wall, but was since removed due to water damage from a chimney and roof leak. Switches installed in the floor provided a discreet means to summon staff. Due to the shortness of their stay, the Peabodys likely did little entertaining here, but this was the main dining room for the Franciscan retreats, used by thousands of participants over the years. The smaller doorway to the left is the entrance to the kitchen area, where meals were prepared, and the large vaulted opening to the right leads to the breakfast porch.
The breakfast porch was used by the Franciscans as an extension of the dining room, and so they removed the doors on the wall. The breakfast room is almost floor-to-ceiling glass windows, again filling the room with ample natural light and pulling visitors outward into the natural world behind the house. In fact, originally these windows were wood and glass doors, not only pulling in light, but also fresh air, while inviting people to roam outside. The top transom windows are original, but the lower windows and doors, as well as many others throughout the house, were recently replaced as part of a larger restoration effort by the Forest Preserve. Not necessarily restoring to the original, but restoring to something much more in keeping with the original design, while at the same time providing better insulation and maintenance value.
Just off the dining room was the kitchen area, as well as chambers for the butler and manservant. Although much of this space was reconfigured by the Franciscans, setting up an industrial kitchen so as to feed 100 to 150 retreat participants per weekend, there was always ample space for pantries, cabinets, and food preparation. And remember that by this time in his life, the only permanent residents in this house, aside from the staff, would have been Francis Peabody and his wife Mary. And so this kitchen space was originally designed for entertaining and on a large scale. And much of the food products prepared here would have come from the 5 farms that made up Peabody's large 800-plus acre estate. Fresh eggs, dairy products, vegetables, as well as poultry, pork, lamb, and beef.
During the Franciscans' long tenure here, the people who worked tirelessly in this kitchen were a handful of Franciscan nuns who did all of the cooking, laundry, and ironing for the Mayslake retreat house with little fanfare or reward. They are deserving of special recognition as their unfailing service supported more than 250,000 visitors to the St. Francis retreat over 6 decades. Notable too in the kitchen is a large red fire hose cabinet for putting out fires. Peabody House visitors will note several of these large fire hose cabinets throughout the household. These, along with concrete floors and other features, made this house highly fire resistant. Architect Benjamin Marshall was particularly sensitive about fire safety, given that a horrific fire devastated his Iroquois Theater in 1903, resulting in the death of more than 600 patrons. Francis Peabody, too, may have been warm to this subject, since he himself would have witnessed the Great Chicago Fire of 1871.
To access the west part of the house, we travel back through the living room and step down into the expansive library, notably the largest room in the house. Our attention is immediately drawn to the south end of the room, a sitting area, where large windows and doors flood the room with a warm natural light, once again highlighting the natural beauty of Mayslake beyond. In the dark-paneled north end of the room, a regal limestone Tudor fireplace dominates the space, flanked by bookshelves, inviting visitors to sit down by the fire with a good book, while thinking important thoughts. Oak bookcases and paneling, replete with wood carvings of classical and natural motifs, fill the room, giving a late medieval or early Renaissance ambiance. The wood flooring of laminated English oak provides a warm setting, quite different from the formality and marble floors of the other first-floor rooms. In addition to serving as a place to showcase Peabody's extensive collection of Robert Louis Stevenson's work, the library was meant for entertaining. There would have been space for a piano, a place where guests could withdraw after dinner for musical entertainment. The wrought iron chandeliers we see today are not original to the house, but are period to the building's construction. After the Franciscans purchased this property, they took advantage of this large space, transforming it into a lecture hall, where it was put to good use during their retreats.
Just adjacent to the library were two small rooms. A paneled hallway to the east leads into Peabody's modest office or study, another oak-paneled room with a small fireplace, where Peabody could do business and manage the affairs of his estate. The shield from the Peabody coat of arms can be seen above the fireplace. This office room also opens up into the front hallway, where Peabody could perhaps meet with business-related visitors without bringing them into the house. This small room holds more secrets, as we will later see, enabling Peabody to quickly and quietly access many other parts of the house.
The second small room off the library is opposite the office hallway to the west and is referred to as the Nook, a quiet place of privacy, apart from the larger and more public rooms adjacent to it. This room, too, carries the library's theme of darkly paneled oak walls, with a modest corner fireplace to warm sojourning scholars. It is noteworthy, however, that this fireplace, as well as all of the other fireplaces in the house, was primarily decorative, as the entire house had modern heating for its time.
The remaining major room on the first floor of the Peabody House was the spacious sun parlor, or porch, then being the westernmost room, designed to soak up the afternoon sun, as here too the walls feature floor-to-ceiling glass windows, which were originally doors. These windows were again recently restored by the DuPage County Forest Preserve to something akin to the original, but with modern insulation, security, and maintenance features. The floor here is of marble, returning to the harlequin pattern as seen in other formal parts of the house. The walls are finished in the same faux cane stone that we saw earlier in the front hallway, carrying upwards to the dramatic ribbed and vaulted ceiling above, lending the air of a French chateau. Note, too, the French Gothic radiator covers in the corners as a finishing touch. The westernmost windows or doors are no more, replaced with an entrance to a hallway leading to the Franciscan Chapel and the dormitories, much later additions which we will discuss later in this video.
We will now move on to the second floor, the more private portions of the Peabody House. To access the second story, we return to the main hallway, this time turning towards the front door, where we now more closely see the rich and warm custom-carved English walnut staircase and balustrades framing the hallway. A staircase to our left leads to a spacious landing several steps up. A flattering portrait of Francis S. Peabody, painted by artist Louis Betts, reminds visitors of the house's origins. The staircase design is referred to as Jacobean, but its carvings feel almost Anglo-Saxon in style, replete with geometric forms and references to nature. The original finish of this woodwork had unfortunately discolored over time and had worn off in some places, with the wood becoming dried out and cracked. Thankfully, it has been painstakingly restored in recent years as part of a DuPage County Forest Preserve restoration initiative. The faux cane walls carry up from the first floor, but there is some damage here and there, perhaps to be restored in future projects.
The stairway leads to a spacious hallway generally running east and west. Along this long hallway were the bedrooms of the housemasters, their guests, and the house staff, as well as several utility rooms for fresh linens, flowers, and other sundry purposes. The floor levels of the hallway are revealing too. As we will see, the lowest floor levels housed the servants, while the highest level was reserved for the private rooms of the masters of the house, Francis S. Peabody and his wife, Mary Sullivan Peabody. The walls and ceilings of most of these second-story rooms are of hand-worked plaster, with wood oak floors. The overall ambiance is warm, traditional, and elegant. We'll start with the guest bedrooms, or chambers, at the head of the stairs, then down a few steps to the servants' quarters. Finally, we'll return and ascend to the Peabody's private quarters in the western part of the building.
There were two main bedchambers at the head of the stairs, with doorways into the main hallway. The westernmost chamber has a corner fireplace, with richly veined marble. Note that most of the bedrooms had small cabinet doors in the lower parts of the wall, providing access to the room's plumbing and electrical, a very pragmatic feature for such an elegant house. This room, too, has a full bath and an ample closet. Large windows face to the south, with excellent views of the lake. The next bedchamber, heading east, also has a doorway onto the main hallway. This room has a slightly larger bathroom and an ample closet, although no fireplace. It, too, looks out over the southern expanse of the Peabody Estate. This hallway also includes a few small utility rooms on the north side of the hallway, one being a spacious linen room. A second is a room especially designed for the cutting and arranging of fresh flowers, not something you see in most houses.
Moving east, we enter into the upper story of the east wing of the house, where two more guest bedchambers are found. A hallway heading south brings us to the first of these. Here again, we find a fairly spacious bedroom with a corner fireplace, a full bath, and a walk-in closet. The end of this hallway leads into the final guest bedroom, again with a full bath and a walk-in closet. This bedroom has the singular feature of a sleeping porch annex, with floor-to-ceiling operable windows, allowing visitors to literally camp out in the evening air on warm summer evenings, lulled to sleep by the gently lapping shores of the nearby lake. This room was only recently restored by the DuPage County Forest Preserve, as most of the original windows were badly decayed.
One more bedroom exists at this level, but this one being on the less desirable north end of the east wing. Here we find the private quarters of the head servant or housekeeper, which included 2 modest-sized rooms and a small bathroom.
Heading further east, into the lower east wing of the house, we pass by a large staircase leading upwards to the attic area. In addition to housing mechanicals, the attic became a sleeping area for retreat visitors during the Franciscan years of operation, before the dormitory buildings were built. Further along this hallway, we take a step down in hierarchy to the servants' quarters. Clustered around this end of the hallway are 6 small bedrooms for servants, with a single shared small and simple bathroom. To be fair, this was considered reasonably good employment 100 years ago. Decent wages, plus room and board. Although by the 1920s, estates such as the Peabodys were having difficulty finding and retaining live-in staff.
To see the Peabody's private quarters, we return westward along the long hallway, ascending steps and hierarchies, passing the main staircase leading up to the west wing of the house and the Peabody sitting room, a private area where they presumably sat. This room was something of a family room, where they might read, converse, or perhaps listen to a phonograph recording or a radio broadcast. The fireplace has a white marble surround and an elegant carved wood mantel, featuring floral and leaf motifs. The room is warmly paneled with wood, although the painted finish we see today was applied by the Franciscans so as to emulate a natural wood finish. Apparently, the cabinetry and woodwork in the Peabody sitting room was not completed when Peabody died in 1922. This large room has a further secret, which we'll reveal upon completing our tour of the Peabody bedrooms.
Leading directly from the sitting room to the northwest was Francis Peabody's bedroom. This was a large, spacious room, although relatively restrained in design. This master bedroom featured large windows to the south and west. It was fitted with a large corner full bath, with a full shower stall, which was something unusual for its time. The room also included a walk-in closet, although it was no bigger than some of the closets in the guest rooms.
An angled doorway leads southeast into Mrs. Peabody's bedroom, arguably the room having the best views for the entire house, looking east, south, and west, drawing in ample light and overlooking the lakes. Her room was very similar in size to Mr. Peabody's, perhaps even a bit larger. She too had an upscale bathroom, although not opulent. She also had a full walk-in closet, similar in size to Mr. Peabody's. However, her chambers also included a commodious dressing room, which included closet space, cabinets, and shelves for additional clothing and accessories, such as hats. Mrs. Peabody was very big on hats. She kept her jewelry within a safe in the dressing room closet.
As one might imagine, once this house was purchased by the Franciscans in the mid-1920s, these second-story bedrooms were significantly reconfigured in order to sleep multiple people, lay people on a weekend Roman Catholic retreat. Most of these later modifications have been removed and repaired as part of restoration efforts by the DuPage County Forest Preserve District.
Before we leave the second story, there is one more feature, one more secret, one more mystery of this house to share. Returning to the Peabody's sitting room, we cast our eye about and see what appears to be a spacious and comfortable wood-paneled room. However, in the northeast corner of the room, one of the panels, a secret panel, conceals what lies behind it, and opens like a door, revealing a fairly narrow, hidden circular staircase, leading us downward. A few moments later, we find ourselves on the first floor in Francis Peabody's office, off the library and vestibule. Then another false door, made to look like a liquor cabinet, opens to reveal the stairway continuing downward. As we descend to the basement, we come upon a large steel safe door. This door was locked so as to prevent someone from coming down the stairs into the basement. Beyond this steel door, directly ahead of us, is another steel safe door. Again, locked in order to prevent someone from entering into the basement rooms beyond.
What were these rooms? And what was the purpose of the secret stairway and the steel safe doors? According to the original plans, these two large basement rooms behind the steel safe doors were not connected to any other rooms, nor were they connected to the outside. They were effectively sealed rooms. This suggests that Peabody, or Marshall, was concerned enough about security in order to install what was effectively a safe room, a place to escape in the event of robbers or home invaders entering the building. It is believed that these two rooms may have held steel safes as well, for keeping valuables.
Indeed, just such a home invasion and robbery occurred in March of 1922, shortly after the Peabodys moved into their new estate, and just a few miles away, to stock trader Arthur Cutton on his Sunny Acres estate, who, along with his family and servants, were robbed, tied up, and locked away in the basement. Remember that there was little in the way of law enforcement in these rural areas at that time. You effectively had to fend for yourselves before you could expect any sort of police response. Some have speculated that Peabody was afraid of striking coal workers from faraway mining towns storming his country mansion, and this was a means of escaping the mob. However, realistically, he would have had ample warning of any such mob, as they would have been coming from faraway locations. And furthermore, as proven by the Cutton robbery, estates such as the Peabodys were far more vulnerable to local gangs or thieves than any other threat.
These basement rooms have been modified significantly since the original design. A passage, for instance, has been knocked into another large room beneath the library, which had external access and served as something of a smoking and billiards room. It is believed that Peabody enjoyed the occasional poker game in this man cave, where he and his friends could wager and play undisturbed until all hours of the evening. And in keeping with the man cave theme, just outside the billiards room was a large sauna and shower, complete with a massage table. Much of this room remains intact today. Apparently, the Franciscans and their retreatants enjoyed a good shower and sauna, as well as the next person. Returning to the safe rooms, the westmost wall of this room beneath the sun porch has been completely knocked out and removed in order to connect to the basement underlying the large chapel and dormitory buildings added by the Franciscans in the 1950s.
The basement man cave complex also suggests that in addition to the singular need for security in a rare event, that the day-to-day use of the secret passage from the Peabody sitting room to the Peabody study to the man cave complex below was Francis Peabody discreetly moving about to his favorite places in the building, out of public view, out of his servants' view, and perhaps out of his wife's view. And on a related note, there is an apocryphal story that there was a connecting tunnel between the Peabody House basement and the Peabody Gatehouse along 31st Street, a very considerable distance of more than 1,300 feet, which would have required substantial construction and significant expense. But there is no evidence that there ever was such a tunnel. Nothing has been found in the original architectural plans, nor in the original building expenses, nor in the later construction of the 1950s additions, which would have certainly cut directly through it when digging the foundation for the addition. In the absence of any evidence, we view this as a suburban myth.
The mechanicals for this large building, including boilers and water heaters, were primarily located beneath the east portion of the structure, under the kitchen and servants' quarters. The basement also included a modest-sized wine cellar, behind yet another steel safe door. Here we see a recreation. The overall space is functional and utilitarian, but sufficiently inviting that Peabody, after a vigorous day of fox hunting, might have led close friends down to a game of poker or billiards, along with cigar smoking and a sauna.
Having discussed the original Peabody House, we will now turn our attention to the significant architectural modifications made by the Franciscan Fathers of St. Louis, who transformed this gentleman farmer's estate into a Roman Catholic retreat over the span of more than 3 decades. Aside from the many modifications that the Franciscans made to the internal rooms of Peabody's house, their primary contributions to the compound were the chapel and the dormitory buildings, large structures built to the west and southwest of the original Peabody House, directly accessible via the sun porch. These buildings were added in the 1950s, designed by architects Gerald A. Berry and Fred D. Kay, marrying the original Peabody House aesthetic with a more ecclesiastic design, fit for a Roman Catholic retreat. They satisfied the pressing needs of campus dormitory space, as well as a more appropriate chapel for the campus.
These additions are directly accessible via the Peabody sun porch, the westernmost room of the building. A 35-foot-long gallery takes us into the multi-story dormitory and chapel, where we enter a modest-sized lobby trimmed in oak. From here we can continue directly into the chapel, or we can use stairs or an elevator to access the multiple floors of the dormitory. The stained glass windows on the doors betray the chapel beyond. This large chapel, built in 1959, modest in decoration, and with an impressive timbered and vaulted ceiling, is approximately 90 feet long by 40 feet wide, with a 55-foot wide transept. After the DuPage County Forest Preserve purchased this property in the early 1990s, they retained the stained glass windows, but naturally removed all religious statues, as this was now a secular space in place of the former sacred.
Escape the serpent's tongue, we will make amends ere long, else the Pakalaya call. So, good night unto you all. Give me your hands if we be friends.
For many years,
and
the
Robin
structure
will
was used
restore
as a
amends.
theater by the First Folio Company, with tiered seating ascending to the stern of the former chapel. However, the theater group shut down a few years ago, largely due to the effects of the COVID pandemic on public performances. Today, the DuPage County Forest Preserve uses this space for special events.
The large multi-story dormitories are accessible via stairs or an elevator. The dormitories were built in 3 phases, starting in 1951 and completing in 1957, creating more than 160 rooms for retreatants and campus visitors. There has been little in the way of restoration or remodeling done to these rooms by the DuPage County Forest Preserve to date, except to clear the floors of all partitions and to ensure that the building is structurally sound and in good working order. It is a huge amount of space and has tremendous potential for the DuPage County Forest Preserve and surrounding communities, although they are still weighing ideas and working towards a master plan.
The final remaining structure related to the Franciscan years of ownership is the Portuincula Chapel, which today resides a little over 400 feet northeast of the Peabody House, directly in line with the front portico. This building was built in 1926 in honor of Francis S. Peabody, who had died 4 years earlier, with funds provided by Peabody's wife and son. The original location of the building was elsewhere on the Peabody Estate, roughly 1,300 feet due south, just beyond and between the lakes, in the general area where Francis S. Peabody died unexpectedly while on a fox hunt due to a heart attack. Francis Peabody's body was reinterred beneath the chapel shortly after the shrine was completed, and his son, Stuyvesant, was also buried there when he died in the mid-1940s. However, the chapel was ultimately moved to its current location, close to the main house and dormitories, in the early 1970s, as its remote location on the campus had left it exposed to vandalism for decades.
The chapel was designed as a replica of the Portuincula Chapel in Assisi, Italy, the birthplace of the Franciscan religious order within the Roman Catholic Church. The building is 36 feet long with a 4-foot apse, by 20 feet wide, and 26 feet in height. The interior of the building is Spartan and simple, reflecting the ideals of the Franciscan order. The mosaic facade and inscription on the front of the chapel describes Jesus Christ granting the Portuincula indulgence, or pardon, to St. Francis of Assisi, with the Virgin Mary, Mother of Jesus, acting as an intermediary. This indulgence has a long and interesting history within the Roman Catholic belief, but one that we will not indulge at present.
Returning finally to the building's exterior, as we stated at the outset, the Peabody House, designed by Benjamin Marshall, is of Tudor Revival design. Such buildings feature steeply pitched gabled roofs, red brick masonry walls with stone trim, stucco cladding, groups of tall, narrow windows, decorative timbers, and large ornamental chimneys. The roof on the Peabody House was made of slate tiles, a very expensive but long-lasting and durable roof covering. The overall feel of the house and grounds is understated elegance, rich but not opulent or ostentatious.
Mirroring the original building, the Franciscan Additions from the 1950s were also built with red brick masonry. The roof pitches and gable ends were designed to be in harmony with the Peabody House. However, the additions have lessened the way of masonry corners or ornamental sculpture. Missing too are the timber and stucco cladding, and the clusters of tall, narrow windows. Instead, the Franciscan Additions have a bit more ecclesiastic and institutional feel to them, in the general look of an Elizabethan country estate, and so do not detract from the original Peabody Marshall architecture.
As with most grand houses built in this time period, the Peabody House was to be ornamented with extensive formal gardens, both in the front and back of the house. Indeed, this was to be a major feature of the southern portion of the house overlooking the lake. However, most of these plans were never realized, as Peabody passed away in 1922, shortly after taking occupancy, and his family ended up selling the house and estate within a few years of his death.
Today, we see two primary lakes behind the Peabody House, and there is some confusion as to their names. The lake referred to as Mayslake today is not the original Peabody Mayslake. Indeed, that lake was referred to as the Gulf in Peabody's day, and it was only partly on Peabody's property. The Gulf had been used by local dairies and farmers for many years for the harvesting of ice in the wintertime, as a means of keeping their milk and dairy products fresh when the weather turned warmer. As Peabody's property properly lacked a lake, he instead added his own, digging out a natural wetland and marshy area to the south of his eventual house location.
After the lake construction, Peabody christened his watery creation Mayslake, ostensibly in honor of his daughter May, and possibly his first wife May, although the latter seems less likely. Then in 1916, Peabody renamed his estate, known early on as Peabody Farms, to Mayslake Farms, a name which is still proclaimed in stone on the estate's former front gates. Peabody's artificial lake drained eastward into the Gulf Lake via an elaborate channel and lock system, which we'll describe in more detail in the next video. Peabody's Mayslake is today officially referred to as Trinity Lake, as a result of renaming when the Trinity Lake subdivision was built in the early 1980s, having previously purchased most of the land around the lake from the Franciscans. Hence, there may be something of a gulf between the original Mayslake and the present-day Mayslake.
As a result of the DuPage County Forest Preserves purchase of the Mayslake Estate from the Franciscan Fathers of St. Louis in the early 1990s, the natural beauty of the former Peabody Estate and the Franciscan Retreat is still enjoyed by thousands of visitors every year. Its rolling terrain featuring mature stands of trees, overlooking meadows, lakes, wetlands, and abundant wildlife, and offering quiet reflection and sanctuary for a busy world.
We'd very much like to thank the DuPage County Forest Preserve District and their staff for their tremendous support in the production of this video. As our tour only scratches the surface of this unique place, we strongly encourage people to visit the Mayslake Peabody Forest Preserve and experience the rich heritage of this site for themselves. In our next video regarding the Peabody Mayslake Estate, we will examine the history of the estate and its environs, from pre-contact days through to the present, a multifaceted story where nature plays a leading role. If you are enjoying these videos, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Or, if you are so inclined, please consider supporting our channel on Patreon. It helps our channel to grow and enables us to make more videos just like this. We'll see you, in a manner of speaking, in our next video adventure.